Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work as a delivery driver for a local courier service, which means I spend most of my days on the road dealing with traffic and impatient drivers. After putting in a solid 10-hour shift, I was absolutely starving and had one thing on my mind: pizza. My stomach was growling so loud I swear other drivers could hear it through their windows. I called my favorite pizza joint and ordered a large pepperoni with extra cheese. The guy on the phone told me it would be ready in 20 minutes, which was perfect timing. I hopped in my beat-up Honda and headed out, already tasting that cheesy goodness. About 5 minutes into my drive, I found myself stuck behind this ridiculously expensive car. It was either a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley, one of those cars that costs more than most people's houses. The thing was gleaming silver with windows so tinted you couldn't see inside, and honestly, it looked completely out of place on our modest suburban road. What really caught my attention wasn't the car itself, but how it was being driven. This thing was all over the place, swerving left, then right, drifting toward the shoulder, then jerking back into the lane. I've seen plenty of bad drivers in my line of work, but this was something else entirely. My first thought was that the driver might be having a medical emergency or something serious, but when I watched more closely, keeping a safe distance behind, I started to suspect something different was going on. The movements were too erratic, too playful somehow. The car continued its zigzag dance down the road for about 2 more minutes. I was getting more and more nervous, wondering if I should call the police or just find another route. Then, without any warning, the luxury car suddenly veered hard to the right and went straight off the road. Boom! The sound was incredible. The car had crashed directly into one of those large electrical utility boxes that sit on the side of the road. Not the massive transformer that would kill you if you touched it, but one of those cabinet-sized ones that handle neighborhood power distribution. Sparks flew everywhere, and there was this bright flash that lit up the evening sky. 2 people practically exploded out of the car like they'd been shot from a cannon. I could see now that they were both teenagers, a boy and a girl who looked like they were maybe 16 or 17 years old. They were both disheveled and looked completely shocked by what had just happened. I started laughing. Not because anyone was hurt, thankfully they both seemed fine, but because the whole situation was so ridiculous. Here were these kids fooling around in what was obviously someone's parents' incredibly expensive car, and they'd just crashed it into a utility box during rush hour traffic. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, still chuckling when the phone rang. The dispatcher answered and I reported the car accident, explaining that 2 teenagers had crashed into an electrical box on Maple Street near the shopping center. When she asked about injuries, I told her both occupants were out of the vehicle and appeared unharmed. I could hear the kids starting to argue in the background, their voices getting louder and more heated. The dispatcher noticed I was laughing and asked about it, which made me explain that the responders would understand when they arrived and that both occupants seemed unharmed beyond some seriously damaged egos. The dispatcher just said okay in a confused tone and told me units were on their way. I hung up and grabbed an old work jacket from my backseat. The teenagers were really going at it now, and I could hear every word. The girl was screaming that she couldn't believe he had crashed her dad's car. I winced at that. This was definitely going to be an expensive mistake. The boy was crying back that he had told her to stop whatever she was doing. Then the girl demanded that he give her his jacket, but he refused, claiming it was freezing outside. I looked at my car's temperature display and saw it was about 60 degrees. Hardly freezing weather. This kid was really something else. I walked over to them and politely got the girl's attention. When she turned around with this absolutely furious expression on her face, I simply tossed her my jacket and told her I had already called the police and they should be there soon. I walked back toward my car, trying hard not to burst out laughing again. The whole situation was just too perfect. Within minutes, 2 police cruisers pulled up with their lights flashing. 4 officers got out and surveyed the damage. I could see the exact moment when they processed what had happened. Their faces went from professional concern to barely contained amusement. One officer approached the teenagers while another came over to me. He asked about my involvement in the situation, and I explained that I had witnessed the whole thing. I mentioned that I actually had it all recorded on my dash cam if he wanted to see it. I pulled up the footage on my phone and showed him the video. He watched the dangerous driving, the final swerve, and the dramatic exit from the vehicle. When it was over, he groaned and covered his face with his hand, then asked if he could get a copy of the footage. By now, a fire truck and ambulance had arrived along with a small crowd of curious onlookers. I ended up showing the footage to several more officers, some EMTs, and a few firefighters. Everyone had the same reaction, barely controlled laughter mixed with disbelief. The first officer came back over with a thumb drive and explained that he needed me to delete the clip because both occupants were minors. I told him it was no problem and deleted the video, then formatted my dashcam's memory card to make sure it was completely gone. By the time I finally made it to the pizza place, I was almost an hour late. The staff was pretty annoyed with me until I explained why I was delayed. It turned out that the power surge from the electrical box had caused a brief outage at their location about 30 minutes earlier. When I told them the story, they found it hilarious and ended up giving me half of my order. I heard later that the girl's father made her get a job to pay for the repairs to both his car and the electrical equipment. Apparently, the total damage was somewhere around $40,000. Ouch! I'm a mechanic by trade, been working on cars and trucks for the better part of 15 years. Last month, my grandfather passed away and left me his old farm. When cleaning out the barn, I found something incredible hiding under a dusty tarp, a 1947 International pickup truck. This thing was a beast, a four-wheel drive monster, with the original Black Diamond inline six-cylinder engine still intact. Sure, it needed work, but the bones were solid. I spent 3 weeks getting her roadworthy. New fluids, cleaned her up, got all the paperwork sorted with a DMV. Once I started driving it around town, the attention it got was unbelievable. People would honk, wave, even flag me down just to get a look. I must get 5 offers a week from folks wanting to buy it. But this truck isn't going anywhere. It's become my most prized possession, and I'm planning to show it at truck rallies once the weather gets better. That's when the trouble started. I pulled into the local convenience store on Tuesday morning needing gas and something for breakfast since I'd skipped it again. After filling up and grabbing a breakfast burrito inside, I walked back out to find some teenager sitting behind the wheel of my truck. Not just looking at it, actually sitting in the driver's seat like he owned the place. I yelled at the kid to get out, telling him it wasn't his truck. The kid didn't even flinch when I got closer. He just sat there with this smug look on his face and asked if I wanted to sell the truck because it was so cool. I told him it wasn't for sale and to get out before I yanked him out of it. The kid argued back that everything was for sale and he wanted it. I repeated that he wasn't getting it and it wasn't for sale. When I opened the door, the kid suddenly bolted like a scared rabbit. I shook my head about kids these days, thinking that was the end of it. Should have known better. I went back inside to get my change and made sure to lock the doors this time. When I came back out, there was the kid again. But now he had back up a man who looked like he could be his father. The older man immediately demanded that I hand over the truck because his son wanted it. This guy was dead serious. I told him it wasn't going to happen and threatened to call the sheriff if he didn't back off from a truck he wasn't getting. The man got even more aggressive and said I was either giving them the truck or they were taking it. That's when I pulled out my phone and started dialing the non-emergency number. Watching this guy's face go white was almost worth the whole hassle. Suddenly he changed his tune, claiming he was just kidding and asking if I wanted to sell it. I pointed at his kid and told him I'd already explained that it wasn't for sale and wouldn't be. I suggested they be gone before the sheriff arrived. They disappeared faster than smoke, but I still waited for the deputy to show up. I gave the deputy the whole story and he checked the security cameras, but there wasn't much they could do without witnesses or catching them in the act. I went about my day, hit the big box store for some supplies, then stopped by the specialty parts shop that deals with classic vehicles to order some restoration parts. Everything seemed normal when I got home, and parked the truck in my secured garage like always. Around 11 p.m. that night, just when I was getting ready for bed, I heard strange noises coming from the garage area. I looked out the window and saw two figures creeping around, trying the security window and attempting to pry open the garage doors. I keep a shotgun for home defense, loaded with rock salt and pork rind rounds. Painful but not deadly unless fired at point-blank range. It's something I learned from an old-timer at the range. The rock salt burns like fire when it hits skin, and the pork rinds stick like superglue and have to be peeled off. Hurts like hell but won't kill anyone. I slipped out the back door with a shotgun and got close enough to see it was the same father and son from earlier. The sound of me chambering around got their attention real quick. I ordered both of them to get on the ground immediately. They dropped like stones, faces in the dirt with their hands behind their heads. We stayed like that until the sheriff's deputies arrived about 10 minutes later. The deputies cuffed me temporarily while they sorted things out, which I expected. They questioned all of us separately, and I told them about the earlier incident at the gas station. These two had the nerve to claim I had stolen their old truck and was hiding it in my garage. When they asked for proof of ownership, I produced the title and registration. The deputies even ran the plates right there in the garage. Everything came back registered to me and me alone. One deputy confirmed that everything checked out and the truck was definitely mine. Watching those two get loaded into the patrol car was pretty satisfying. They were charged with trespassing, attempted theft, attempted auto theft, and a few other things. At their initial court appearance, when the judge asked if there were any objections to releasing them on their own recognizance, I stood up. I told the judge I objected because these individuals wanted my truck so badly, they snuck onto my property in the middle of the night to try to steal it. I explained that I feared if they were released, they'd try again. The judge denied their release. They're still sitting in jail waiting for their trial date. About a week later, I get served with papers. Turns out there's a third player in this mess, an entitled woman who's apparently the kid's mother and the father's ex-wife. Karen accused me of assaulting her son and ex-husband and threatening them with a deadly weapon. She was suing me for emotional distress, assault, and false imprisonment. Her lawyer was about as sharp as a bowling ball. During the deposition, he tried to argue that I had no right to defend my property and that his clients were just admiring my truck. My lawyer had a field day with the security footage from the gas station and the police reports. The lawsuit got thrown out faster than a bad pitch, and Karen ended up having to pay my legal fees. The father and son both pled guilty eventually. The father got 6 months in county jail and 3 years probation. The kid got community service and probation since he was a minor, but he also had to write me a letter of apology. During sentencing, the judge asked if they had anything to say. The kid actually asked if he could still buy the truck when he got out. Even the judge laughed at that one. Some people never learn. My truck is still safely in my garage, and I've added some extra security cameras. I've shown it at 3 truck rallies since then, and every time someone asks if it's for sale, I just smile and tell them about the last people who really wanted it. I'm a 21-year-old guy dating a 30-year-old woman who's amazing. We've been together for about 8 months now, and she invited me to her hometown for her cousin's wedding. She was going to be one of the bridesmaids, which meant she had to pack practically her entire wardrobe. I'm talking about bags so stuffed that we literally had to sit on them to get the zippers closed. The wedding was in a small town about 3 hours away, and taking the bus was our cheapest option. We're both students, so every penny counts. The bus system in the Czech Republic has this thing where you can pay extra to reserve specific seats, but we decided to save money and just take our chances with the unreserved seating. Usually it works out fine, especially on weekday trips. So there we were at the bus station, each of us dragging our oversized bags and trying not to look as tired as we felt. My girlfriend had been up until 2 in the morning making sure she had everything perfect for the wedding. Her bridesmaid dress alone took up half her bag, and then she needed shoes, makeup, hair accessories, and about 15 different outfit options for the various wedding events. The bus arrived right on time, and we watched when the passengers with reserved seats boarded first. That's just how it works. They pay extra, they get priority. The rest of us formed a loose line behind them, waiting our turn. It wasn't anything formal, just people naturally organizing themselves based on who was there first. We'd been waiting for about 10 minutes when this woman showed up. She was probably in her 60s, wearing a beige windbreaker and carrying a small purse. Nothing about her seemed threatening at first. She walked up and stood right next to us, which was fine. The line wasn't super organized anyway. But then, when the reserved passengers finished boarding and our turn came up, she suddenly stepped right in front of my girlfriend. Just like that. She didn't say, "Excuse me," didn't acknowledge what she'd done, just moved forward like she'd been there the whole time. My girlfriend looked at me with this expression of complete shock. She started saying out loud that this was a really witchy thing to do and asked if I could believe what this woman had just done. She was speaking in English, which most of the older generation in this country doesn't understand very well. I was honestly pretty calm about it. I've been counting the passengers when they boarded, and there were still plenty of unreserved seats available. We'd probably still get to sit together, so I didn't see the point in starting a fight over it. I told my girlfriend that we shouldn't be surprised when witches do witchy things. I don't know, I probably shouldn't have said that. But I was tired, the bags were heavy, and I was getting a bit impatient myself. We finally got on the bus and found seats. My girlfriend chose 2 seats directly behind the woman who cut in front of us. I would have preferred sitting in front of her so I could slowly recline my seat and annoy her throughout the trip, but this turned out to be much better. Here's where the bus layout becomes important. The woman had chosen seats in the very last row that had an overhead storage shelf. The shelf was actually a bit longer in the front, so if everyone just moved their bags toward the front of the bus a little, there was plenty of room for everyone. When we put our bags up there, the shelf was basically empty. I could have fit 5 more bags easily. The bus started moving and immediately this woman got on her phone. And let me tell you, she was not a quiet phone talker. She talked loudly about how excited she was to see her grandson because he was such a sweet boy. But then she complained about how he played awful metal music in his room all the time and how she couldn't stand the noise. She went on about how it was just screaming and banging with no melody at all. She went on like this for about 20 minutes, telling whoever was on the other end about how much she hated loud music and how young people today have no consideration for others. The irony was completely lost on her. After she finally hung up, she took off her windbreaker and started looking around for somewhere to put it. That's when she noticed my bag sitting directly above her seat in the overhead compartment. Now keep in mind that the shelf was mostly empty. She could have easily moved her jacket 35 centimeters to the right and hung it up there. She could have put it on the empty seat next to her. She had options. But instead she turned around and looked at me with this entitled expression. She told me in a rude tone that she couldn't put her jacket anywhere because my fat bag was in the way. I was honestly kind of bored at this point, so I decided to have a little fun with this. I acted shocked and said, "Oh no, what would we do? And maybe if we put our heads together, we could find a solution." Her face went through this amazing transformation. First shock, then this look of pure grandma rage that I didn't even know existed. She yelled back at me, asking if I didn't know that the shelf space was for the person directly below the seat. I never heard this rule before in my life. I've taken buses all over Europe, and people just put their bags wherever there's space. But I decided to play along. I apologized and said I truly didn't know that was an unspoken rule. I asked if the space above her seat was only for her and the potential passenger next to her. She was getting more worked up now, thinking she was about to win this argument. She confirmed that yes, it was exactly like that, and demanded that I move my bag to my spot. I told her, of course, right away I would move it immediately. Here's where the malicious compliance kicked in. I stood up, grabbed my girlfriend's bag from the overhead shelf, and placed it on the seat where I had been sitting next to her. But I left my own bag in exactly the same spot above the woman's seat. Then I plopped myself down right next to her, in the seat that was now available. You could see her brain trying to process what had just happened. She demanded that I move to my spot, and technically I had. She'd never actually said I had to move my bag, but I wasn't done yet. I remembered her phone conversation about hating metal music, so I pulled out my headphones and put them in. Then I found the loudest, most aggressive death metal playlist I could find on my phone and cranked the volume up way too high. I'm probably going to have hearing damage from this, but it was absolutely worth it. I don't even like death metal normally. I'm more of a pop and rock guy. But sitting there listening to screaming vocals and pounding drums while watching this woman's face get redder and redder was pure entertainment. She kept shooting me these angry looks, but what could she say? I was wearing headphones. Technically, I was being considerate by not playing the music out loud. The fact that my headphones were cheap and leaked sound wasn't really my problem. My girlfriend was a little sad that I didn't sit next to her for the rest of the trip, but she understood. She kept looking over and trying not to laugh at the woman's increasingly frustrated expressions. The woman tried a few more times to get comfortable, but every time she moved, she had to deal with my bag hanging right above her head. She couldn't recline her seat properly because she was worried about hitting it. She couldn't stretch out because I was taking up part of her armrest space. About an hour into the trip, she finally gave up and moved to a different seat toward the front of the bus, but the damage was done. She'd made a big scene about how the shelf space belonged to whoever was sitting below it, and now she was abandoning her own seat. Everyone around us had watched the whole thing play out. When she moved, I switched back to sit with my girlfriend, and we spent the rest of the trip laughing about what had just happened. The woman kept looking back at us with this sour expression, but there wasn't anything she could do about it. When we finally reached our destination, she was one of the first people off the bus. She grabbed her bag from the overhead compartment with this dramatic sigh, like she'd been through some terrible ordeal. When she walked past us, she said something under her breath in Czech that I'm pretty sure wasn't very nice, but honestly, I didn't care. She decided to cut in line and then make up ridiculous rules about bus etiquette when it suited her. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.